afternoon, Dr. Jones and guests. My name is Cathy Dickey, and I have a question for you. Actually, I have two. I'd like to know what the words ombudsman and volunteer mean to you when you hear them mentioned. My purpose today is to provide you with the information that may have never come to mind when you hear these two words. I chose this topic for two reasons. The first being that I was an ombudsman for 5 years. I served with my husband's seagoing commands twice. I served under a rear admiral for the Atlantic Fleet. And I have many experience volunteering, as I'm sure many of you have as well. I want to be able to talk about how unique these roles are and important they are. But when I think about that, it leads me to wonder, what is it that makes us provide a service and help others of our own free will with very little pay, or no pay, and very little recognition for the sake of humanity? The definition of the ombudsman originated in Scandinavian countries, and it simply refers to the safeguarding of the citizens' rights. The definition of an ombudsman in our American Heritage Dictionary of the English language states that an ombudsman is a volunteer that is appointed by the commanding officer to be provided as a link between the command and its military families. The definition of a volunteer, again according to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language, is one who offers to perform or provide a service of their own free will and the sake of humanity. The history of the military family ombudsman and volunteers. First off, the concept of the ombudsman originated in Scandinavia. The military here in America saw that it was producing great things, so they adopted it and made it their own. In September of 1970, according to the Fleet Family Support Program, Admiral Zumwalt Jr. appointed and created the Ombudsman Program so that they could start providing services between their military commands and their military families. He also made it mandatory that every command have an ombudsman nationwide. Many historians have found instances where volunteerism has gone back into colonial times, where people had come together and offered to help one another in times of despair, especially when they were having to relocate and move across vast land. And that is according to the history of volunteerism in America. What does an ombudsman do? Does anybody have an idea? What are some things that an ombudsman may provide for a family?
I think they help in emergency crises, like financial issues.
Right? Yes, they do. An ombudsman's role is, yes, that of a volunteer, but they are also put in charge of developing emergency resources for families, writing the command monthly newsletter for the families, the care line so the families can call in, see how the crew's doing when they're underway, establish a phone tree in the time of crisis, especially during the cold, when we had the accident with the cold. The phone tree was a really utilized source. What do you think a volunteer may do? Anybody have any idea? Volunteers kind of serve anywhere and everywhere, in any size community, any person. They serve within our community's development, they serve in health, they serve in information and communication, they serve in HIV/AIDS foundations, food pantries, homeless shelters, things of that nature. An ombudsman stands apart from a volunteer just a little bit, only because they serve the military community only. They don't serve the outside members. Whereas a volunteer serves, like I said before, any community. Again, I'm going to open the floor to any questions. Yes? Anybody? No? Yes?
What age you want to volunteer to be an ombudsman?
That's a good question. Because I saw a lot of young military families just coming into the service, and spouses were deploying rapidly, and the spouse that was at home was kind of floundering, didn't really know how to navigate their life, their new lifestyle. And I had been there, and I had to figure it out on my own because nobody told me about an ombudsman. I had to seek it. So I wanted to be somebody that could help that person find resources so they wouldn't have to dig for them like I had to. Anyone else? Yep.
And so I'm pretty sure you already mentioned it. So in order to become an ombudsman, can anybody just become an ombudsman? Like civilian-wise, or do you have to? Just somebody in your family have to be in the military?
That's a good question. When you sign up to be an ombudsman, but you actually have to fill out an application. It's almost like getting a job, and you have to be interviewed by the command. But you do have to be a spouse of a military member or a military member. Okay. Anyone else? As I stated previously, the definitions of an ombudsman and a volunteer, both with different choices of words that were used to describe them, but with similar meanings. The understanding that both positions provide a service of their own free will. Volunteers came along before the concept of an ombudsman, so that is another way that volunteers stand out. The concept was already there prior to the concept of an ombudsman. We have different but similar roles. Provide so many needed services throughout society. So I'm just going to ask you before I close, as I stated in the beginning, what comes to mind when somebody says, I volunteer at the soup kitchen, or I'm an ombudsman for the Navy or Marine Corps Relief Society? Anybody have an answer?
When I was supposed to know to be, regardless of military.
Do you see them as the same?